The Labour Party candidate in the February 25th presidential election, Peter Obi, has challenged the federal government to disclose the nation's incurred deficit by President Bola Tinubu's administration. Now, recall that the National Security Advisor, Noor Ribadu, had lamented that the current administration inherited a bankrupt country from the administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari.
That's exactly my thought. And I was wondering why nobody is asking the same question. Why are you lamenting the same particular model that Buhari employed becoming president of this country? You campaign vigorously, you want to turn the country around, you want to renew the country, you want to change, you want to make the country progressive. You saw the statistics, some of the people that worked with the former government worked with you, and then you got to power. Now you are saying that you inherited a bad government, you inherited debt, you inherited a failed system. My guy, if you cannot fix it, resign and get out of that place. It's becoming very... And this model is what they use to blame the previous government and do not do anything. The same thing that Buhari blamed Jonathan for is what Tinubu has come now is blaming Buhari for. And most likely, the next president, if God doesn't save this country from this criminal entity, will also come to blame. Peter Obi's perspective, they say, tell us, how much did you meet in the coffers? How much is the country owing? What are the figures? What are the statistics? Tell us. I am saying, bro, if you cannot change the course of this country, if you cannot do what you're supposed to do, what you campaign for, resign and get out. Get out. Make them no say space. They go home. Watch the video and share this video. Let Tinubu know that it's not business as usual. And I'm happy that Peter Obi is calling the bluff of his ass every time he gets to. He needs to realize that he may not be it intellectually, but he's not leading the people that are not there intellectually. Fortunately, we are being led, just disappointment that an army of lions is being led by a sheep. Then I have mosquitoes. I'll catch you guys later. Share this video.
The Labour Party candidate in the February 25th presidential election, Peter Obi, has challenged the federal government to disclose the nation's incurred deficit by President Bola Tinubu's administration. Now, recall that the National Security Advisor, Noor Ribadu, had lamented that the current administration inherited a bankrupt country from the administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari.
Now, according to him, the revenue generated by the Tinubu-led administration is being used to repay what was taken from the country. However, in a series of tweets via his profile on X, the former Anambra State governor said that the federal government should disclose the deficit inherited from the previous All Progressives Congress administration, a move that will portray its level of transparency and accountability. Now, let's look at some of the tweets. We'll be showing some of the tweets to you. He says, and I quote, "I just read yesterday a widely publicized story from the present APC-led federal government saying that they inherited a bankrupt nation from their predecessor APC administration. But the story failed to disclose what they inherited, which had qualified us for bankruptcy status." He did go further to say one major characteristic of responsible governance is transparency and strict accountability. This demands that the government disclose exactly the degree of deficit they inherited. What is inherited should be disclosed to enable the public to know where we are and where we are headed. Recall that the previous APC government made a similar claim in 2015 against the PDP administration that handed over to them without telling the nation that what it actually inherited. Rather, they took our debt profile from 12.6 trillion naira in 2015 to 87 trillion in 2023 when they left office without improving on any of the indices of development, which are education, health, poverty, eradication, and insecurity. Security, I beg your pardon. Instead, the condition of the nation on every development index got worse, leading to the present sad state. Nigerians know things are bad and they experience it daily. What they now want to hear regularly are measurable and verifiable steps to improve the situation. Let's now bring in Chukwuma Okenwa. He's the Executive Director, Lead Network Africa, and he'll be joining us to talk more about it. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Now, before we get into the presidential candidate or candidate of the Labour Party, Peter, I'll be asking for the governor to make full disclosure. The argument that this administration inherited a tough country from the former administration, is it one that holds water, especially as this argument has been brought up exactly as well in 2015, and also because it feels like this is a continuation from one party to the same party. So do you think that this argument holds water?
It holds water, certainly, because governance and government, like we know, it's all about continuity. The Tinubu administration was not expected to bring in his wealth to work for Nigerians. it's expected that the development stride of any administration continues from whatever reserve they have as a nation, if indeed they actually have one. But then I think also Nigerians are indeed tired of the rhetorics. Like every cycle of administration come claiming and probably giving excuses that maybe the previous administration before them left the nation pocketless, maybe as a way to excuse themselves from obvious failures of their own regime. But one of the things we should also be thinking about is the very fact that there should be consequences. If you just tell us that your predecessors did not leave any money behind, and as a government, with all of the state powers, with all of the state apparatus, with all of the institutions to probe, to investigate, to interrogate all that has happened and that brought the nation to this particular stance, then I mean, it would just be like complaining for nothing, right? So I really think that the complaints are not enough. There should be consequences.
Yeah, I mean, well, we don't get to see that often, and it's a good angle that you've brought in. Consequences for failures in the previous administration, consequences for mismanagement in the previous administration, consequences for even corruption in the previous administration. What we see instead is that we find one person, make that person the scapegoat and the face of corruption for the previous administration, and then every other person, goes home to enjoy their wealth and whatever it is that the crimes that they committed. So, when we hear these things and we hear that, they inherited a lot of chaos and all of that, should Nigerians ignore these things? Because if you're not going ahead to investigate and prosecute whatever was mismanaged in the previous administration, then stop telling us. Should that be the mindset that Nigerians should have?
I think Nigerians should not just go the way of, well, if you're not really doing the needful, then don't disturb our peace. I mean, we are talking about public funds here. In fact, in the recent, since Nigerians own this wealth, they should be able to demand that the people that made away with this wealth pay dearly for it. So these are some kind of things that I want to see, like honestly, the Nigerian Labour Congress, the civil society, the media, all relevant stakeholders, including the National Assembly, engage in strategic communication over a range of time, mounting the needed pressure on the executive until the needful is done. It's really obvious that maybe for one party, that the previous administration we're talking about is no longer the case of PDP, when President Muhammad Buhari will always blame PDP as a different party. Now it is same party blaming same party. And for that to really happen, I will really say that it does appear the situation is worse than really expected. It has to be like a critical one that Mr. President has to cry out, because certainly Nigerians may not know the depths to which this has happened. But then, like Peter Obi has rightly said, to what extent? Because of course, anything you cannot measure, you cannot manage. If you cannot measure the problem appropriately, then it's obvious that you cannot be able to tackle the problem. So Nigerians, not just Peter Obi, we are interested or want to know to what extent do we have this gap. And one thing also that you mentioned is, this issue of like newfound love for loans, and unfortunately not even reflecting in the major developmental indices, like he pointed out, like health, education, security, poverty eradication. So it's really very, very, very painful that many of these things, like lots of critical funds that would have been used to develop critical infrastructure in Nigeria, is being expended on frivolities, on even things that citizens cannot place their hands in. And this thing should not be so.
All right, would you say that this administration, having complained that they've inherited a tough economy, a tough country from the previous administration, that they're only paying lip service to the difficulty that Nigerians are facing, especially when taking a look at some of the items that were on the supplementary budget and the cost of governance, the bloated, some would refer to it as an over-bloated cost of governance that we're running. Would you say that this is lip service that is being played?
Honestly, because of course, when you look at the supplementary budget, even the attempted funding process, and the things that is earmarked for, right? The ones that, when you look at some of those things that has to do with like the personal luxury, expenditures, even for a nation that's going through like a critical moment such as this. then they really tell you that the three-hydra-headed problem, aside from like the issue of revenue generation, which is very critical for any nation that wants to grow, but the three-hydra-headed problems of government wastage, poor management, because no matter how rich you are as a nation, you need to manage the wealth. Not to talk about like a nation that largely depends on debt, to even fund the deficits in the budget. So it's really a major problem. And of course, you now also talk about like the trust, for the international community, your ability to like attract foreign direct investment. No investor wants to invest money into the hands of a government that cannot even manage its own wealth. It's just like maybe if you're a bank and you're giving loans, someone wants you to come and invest into their business. The first thing you want to do is to check their books, right? Look at how far they have fared with managing their own resources, so that when you give them other people's money, which is just like the foreign direct investment, you are sure that they are going to manage it well.
All right, Mr.
Because foreign direct investment, you have some people with the funds looking for where to invest.
Mr.
But certainly they will look for those that have that trust score.
Hold our thoughts. Let's go on a break. When we come back, we'll still be speaking more about this and asking for how long will this excuse be a legitimate excuse that the government can profile. Welcome back to Breakfast Central. Before we went on the break, we're speaking about the current administration, and they're saying that the excuses they're giving that a lot of this the crisis will not be upturned overnight. We're joined by Mr. Chukwuma Okenwa, who will be, sharing with us some of his thoughts, and who has been sharing with us some of his thoughts regarding this. Now, Mr. Okenwa, the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu, did say that Nigerians should be patient. That a number of what we're experiencing will not disappear overnight, as they were inherited from the Buhari-led administration. How long is it, how long is this overnight that we're talking about? Because it's been, 5 months now that this current administration has been in office. How long enough is it, at what point will the excuse that they inherited a tough administration or a bad government, at what point does that excuse run out?
Well, let me say something that is very, very important. World over, we know as long as governance is concerned, like the conventional first 100 days in office. First 100 days is enough to adjudge from the body language of any visionary administration to witness some level of impact. And then when you now talk about in terms of economics, every 3 months, where you evaluate whether maybe a country is actually growing economically or experiencing a recession. So 90-day period is enough, to really witness some level of growth or to confirm retardation. And I think the latter has been the case in the case of Nigeria, because nothing is really static in life. You can be sure that it will not be right to say that Nigeria is currently the way it was when Tinubu met it. So as the days go by, just within 24 hours of announcing that subsidy was gone, we saw like a kind of impact that took people years back into struggle. Maybe some people that before, the kind of hardship they witnessed some years back, and it took them like being industrious, hardworking, diligent to overcome that, they saw themselves slough again into that level of despondency, right? So if within 24 hours, you can actually create despair, and economically within 3 months, you can actually adjudge progress or recession, then I don't think the current administration needs 8 years to prove to Nigeria whether they really mean well for us or not. So 3 months is enough.
Okay, it definitely is enough, and another question people have been asking is, how, if there was a different government in office, if it was, hypothetically, well, let's just say if it was a different government in office, how would they have acted different? In what ways could they have maybe set the tone for Nigerians to see that, yes, we inherited a bad government, but we know what we're about to do, and we know the steps that we must take in order to set, us on the right track?
Yeah, three steps, obviously. First is, of course, we know that up till now, even the money stolen by Abacha is still being returned. The beautiful thing is about some of these past administration, many of them are still alive. We don't have to wait till when their chapter has ended before we hope for another return. Nigeria may not be that fortunate. So the first political move, that demonstrates where we be, go after those people with the Nigerian funds. Recover as much as you need to recover. Ranging from Obasanjo, who was accused of, allegedly investing up to 16 billion into power and unaccounted for. I think $16 billion. That's quite huge. You know, to go after the other administration with lots of, including, you know, probably like use of proxies that were under them, lots of corruption cases. Go and recover as many as possible. We can't be talking about looking for money when you have like these monies in the hand of single individuals in Nigeria. Secondly, with B,
yeah, but the challenge is, isn't that going to be distracting? Because if you start, you know, your government, and the very first thing you're doing the first few weeks or months is chasing after who stole money, who didn't steal money, you know, that's also going to take court cases. It's also going to take, you know, proper investigation. It will take a bit, you know, before all these things are proven, before investigations are, you know, fully carried out and the likes, and before you can even charge anyone to court. That takes a while. So, I mean, while that is going on the side, are there things that, you know, the Nigerian government maybe could have done different? The Tinubu administration could have done different? You know, maybe not, yes, you know, appointing 48 ministers, maybe not, you know, spending money on a presidential yacht, maybe not, you know, buying cars for national assembly, maybe not spending 400 billion naira on, you know, cash transfer and the likes. Is there a way that they could have redirected our current, you know, what our current income is?
Yeah, certainly. Apart from that, and of course, not leaving out my thoughts on the issue of recovering our money. If they want it to be speedy, I mean, the executive can, you know, play a role with the key stakeholders, including investigating organizations like police, EFCC, and of course, certainly the judiciary. But beyond that, away from that, there's cutting down on wastages, which have continued. I mean, even an unusual proportion, collecting of loans to spend on luxury. We don't need much of that. And then, I also expect that any government that really mean well for the people, rather than focusing on immediate removal of subsidy, which is the commonest things Nigerians enjoy by being one of the biggest oil producing nation. Over the time, they just try to make this look as if to say, oh, Nigerians should be grateful to the government, right? You know, for subsidizing oil. But of course, that wouldn't have been necessary if our refineries were functioning optimally. So whilst they are saying Nigerian, I see subsidy as like, okay, be patient a bit while we fix the refineries. But removing that without really having like any sustainable palliative measure in place, not like the one we saw, like sharing of rice, you understand, 2 mudu of rice to some areas, you know, which cannot in any way match, just even for 1 week, the level of suffering, you know, that was, you know, unleashed on Nigerians. So we want to see like that policy direction in terms of this one major resource that our economy hangs on. You know, just like was disclosed, that NNPC for the past 3 years never remitted any forex to the federation account. Why? Because these monies were allegedly being used for subsidy, right? So why don't you like a kind of part of like that particular money, divert it, fix the refineries? And then Nigerians are also asking, how about the Dangote refineries and all the promises that it holds? So a lot of things keep going under the carpet, and we're just watching, hoping that it's going to be best. And I hope that, like Mr. President promised, that by December, the refinery in Port Harcourt will be fully in operation. We hope and we do pray that that works by December. That's next month, of course.